Today. This is Jim from the Pain PT. Good to see everybody. We have another success story. I'm always happy to bring them to everybody. We have Brad here. Brad, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Jim.
So happy you're willing to come on. I know we talked off air, and we were as you were recovering, you were waiting for this day. And I know I had
hmm
asked you a couple times before, and you said, "Well, I'm not quite there yet," but now you are.
hmm
So I'm
hmm
happy to have you here today. And I'm going to turn it over to you and share your story.
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up because I'm the type of person where I was never going to be there, because that whole perfectionistic part of me is waiting to do it perfectly, and I realize that's kind of part of the healing process is letting that go, and I'm like really excited to be here and share about my story. And so I know like a lot of what discovered is a lot of my chronic symptoms came from like unprocessed emotional stuff, like things from particularly from childhood, adolescence. And it started off with my first chronic symptom being anxiety. And a big part of that started off when I was in, I would say, fourth grade. I was slowly discovering that I was gay, and it was like something that I knew I couldn't talk about or share about. And what happened is I remember I was starting to behave very differently in school, and to the point where my mom took me to the doctor because I was just something was off, and yet I was kind of holding that secret in. And by the time I got to junior high, it just got worse. Like I couldn't find myself connecting with others, and was experiencing some bullying. And one thing I was thinking about was Gabor Mate talks about how we disconnect from our bodies and our feelings when we're experiencing some type of trauma, and that's kind of what was happening. And so that was a big trigger for me. And what happened there is it set my brain on high alert, and I got used to living with my brain on high alert 24/7, and that just never went away until I started recovering. And so I, you know, survived my junior and senior high years. And I thought for some reason, like magically, when I was done with school, things would get better, but that's not what happened. It's just the anxiety continued. Just again, felt disconnected, lost. And then I noticed it went from not just anxiety, but depression, and going kind of back and forth where I would burn out on anxiety and then depression would kick in.
Mhm.
And so the more I think about it, I truly think the symptoms are very much connected to my physical symptoms. So I went to college, and and another thing I wanted to share too is I had an experience of myself where, and I think it was rooted in shame, where I was very much a human doer. So I really thrived in being successful and getting straight A's mostly. And that just kind of fed into my self worth. And also trying to please others, being a people pleaser was a big part of it. And I um, remember that, because of that, when I ended up going into teaching, and again, teaching was a perfect job for me because I got to, spend my time, helping students learn. But it also, I think my brain liked that position because you're always on high alert as a teacher.
Mhm.
And, but I noticed I would say by my first year of teaching, another symptom started to show up, and that was the fatigue, where I would just crash, and that was there on and off ever since then. I've had that issue, and by the time I hit 25, I started getting back pain, and it was very much related to the stress of my job. And I started seeing a chiropractor, and uh, with some results, and that's when I started getting the diagnoses, like you have scoliosis, you have this, you have that, and then they showed me, and that's when I started really believing, like the MRIs and the X-rays, and having that feeling of temporary relief, like, oh, we found the problem. But one thing that was a strong theme for me too, as I was struggling through those childhood years, was um, this sense of hopelessness. Just before I came out as gay, I think that the hopelessness was really strong. I just couldn't figure out like a happy future. And then, though I experienced some temporary relief from finding out I had scoliosis, there was like a sense of hopelessness because you can't fix that. And so I did chiropractor, and I would say I did it on and off from then until I started working with you and another pain psychologist. And so I kind of just went through life with the anxiety, with some depression, brain on high alert, on and off chiropractic appointments. And then something remarkable happened in 2017 where I was actually in Mexico City at the time. And I was having a hard time accessing my funds, my money. And it became very stressful fast because I'm like, am I going to run out of money before this trip is done? And I remember during that period, I was walking down the street and suddenly just felt this intense pain, like in my lower left back, to the point where I immediately turned around and went back to my hotel. And so that was the first time, and I made no connection at that time, obviously, with I'm, have a lot of stress. Like there was no connection between stress and sudden pain,
You
but
just
it was
kind of went back.
baffling.
You just thought, oh, my back's acting up. I better go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that really threw me is in the other times, the pain was more of a nagging, unpleasant pain, but never a shooting pain.
Mm.
Never a one moment, everything's normal, next moment shooting pain.
Mhm.
And I was just completely baffled. Like it almost felt like as if I had done something to cause an injury, but I could not make a connection to any sort of injury. And so that pain was there. It got better. I took some medication, and but as I was thinking about this, that's the first time I really recall a remarkable like event where I went from no pain to lots of pain for no reason.
Yeah. And I
No
always
physical
think about
reason.
how many millions of people on this planet Earth have something like that, where they have no
Hmm.
idea it's stress related, and yet they have these strong physical symptoms and they go pop a pill or go
Hmm.
take medicine and
Hmm.
go for an adjustment. And really the
Hmm.
cause was stress. So it's great to look back,
Hmm.
right, and see, yeah, okay, I had a
Hmm.
couple of these moments.
Yeah, yeah. And so then that happened, and I had a few moments like that, and then you know it was 2020. You can all imagine there was some stress that year,
Yeah.
and it first started off where our school district, we were getting close to going on strike, and my back pain was really intense at that point, to the point where I was wondering, can I even strike with the other teachers? And I remember that was happening. Then suddenly COVID came upon us, and it just shot in that pain. And I was fortunate to find a physical therapist, I guess, at that point. And so I did some physical therapy, chiropractic. I was going like 2, 3 times a week for a few months. And then after a few months, things settled down. And then it was really all about just on and off nagging pain. And I found myself doing a lot, like using those patches and trying to find ways to um, deal with the discomfort. One thing I've been getting for the past, I'd say 17 years, I get weekly massages. And I was talking to my massage therapist about this, and we were talking about how back then, like, she could not put enough pressure on my back to, get the discomfort and tightness out. And, and she just kept commenting, your muscles are so tight in your back.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's,
I would see that all the time too as a PT, working on
mhm,
people so tight. You might get them a little bit loose, right, as temporary relief, and
mhm,
boom, right
mhm.
back to a level of tightness.
Yeah, so I went to PT and things got mildly better, but not 100%. And I remember that after a few months, they did all the different tests and things, that they do for PT, and it just hit a point where I was told like, yeah, we really have PT isn't going to help you. We really have nothing more for you. And So it was settled down. It just felt like I'd have moments where it was really intense, and then it would kind of settle down, and then maybe 8 to 10 months later, it would ramp up again, and I
Mm.
would do some PT, and then it would settle down enough to make things tolerable. And so then the next phase where it really kind of got worse again was 2021. In the fall of 2021, I had gotten some dental work done and it didn't go very well. And I had some like lingering dental pain, which now that I think about it, it went from acute to chronic. And any sort of symptoms here kind of freaked me out. And and I remember it finally kind of settled down, but then I hit a point, I would say in November of 2022, where the back pain was just debilitating and being able to teach was so hard. I remember it's just anytime I was not sitting in a chair, like a particular chair, it just was hard to fully do my job and be fully present with my students. And that was a really tough year of teaching, and that was actually my final year of teaching.
Mm.
And so an interesting thing that happened then was I applied for a different position where I coached teachers, and I was accepted into the job, and there's that elation, like cool new opportunity. And it was just before spring break, and I come to Mexico City a lot, so I came down here again, and suddenly I remember one day feeling this strange sensation right here, and it was just kind of crawling up and down my spine, and it wasn't really pain, it was just very unsettling. And soon after that, it I started experiencing like neuropathy and experiencing these patches of neuropathy throughout my body. And oh,
This was
I
in
forgot.
addition to the back pain, or the back pain that
Yeah,
kind of
back
settled down,
pain.
and this.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought of something else I completely forgot about was in that November of 2021. So a few months before that, I started getting stiffness in my fingers, these two fingers right here, for no reason. And they did an MRI and they discovered like some damage here. What do they call it? Stenosis, like moderate
Mhm.
stenosis here. And but it was in the wrong place to have these symptoms. It was on the wrong vertebrae.
The nerve root, yeah, was not lining up with the fingers.
Yeah. So I had this, and then I noticed my left leg started to stiffen up a lot. And starting in November of 2021 for until I'd say 2023, like after walking a couple blocks, my leg would stiffen up. And I just got used to not being able to walk more than a couple blocks without that left leg stiffening up.
Hmm. And you
Yeah.
just
So
at the time attributed it to the back or due to
at
something
the time,
fine?
yeah, definitely I did not attribute it to like emotional stuff. But yeah, it was, yeah, I was, I didn't, by that point, I just didn't know. And we couldn't figure it out. Like, let's just do some more PT, and no one really knew the answer. And again, it just was that kind of that hopelessness. And um, so I came back from spring break, had a couple more months left of teaching, and that's when things really went south fast.
Hmm.
And I started getting more like of the neuropathy. So they put me on pregabalin, I think it's called,
Hmm.
and then another medicine, I think it's called Cymbalta. And so we started that, and I thought it was helping at first, and then it wasn't, and then we kept increasing to like to the max dosage, and I still had symptoms, and it got to the point where like the symptoms would be very strange, like everything was on the left side of my body, the symptoms, except I would get like neuropathy on the right half of my tongue. Like you could draw a line down the side of my tongue, and
That's a
like
strange one, right? I mean, there's always, I tell people it can go anywhere in the body and just like one side of your tongue. I mean, that's an interesting one, right?
yeah, yeah, it was really really odd, and I ended up taking quite a bit of sick leave at that point, just because we moved from where I could sleep at night to where I wake up with symptoms, and I would have the experience like someone was piercing the bottom of my foot with a pin, and so like a shocking, like a little shock experience. And it, yeah, it was not, and as you can imagine, the more the symptoms were kicking in, the more desperate I became, the more research I was trying to do, definitely many more doctor's appointments.
So you had a
I've
whole, just to sum up, you had a lot of different types of symptoms, right? At this point,
mhm.
building up
Yeah.
over these years. You didn't have any answers, right? You got maybe some intermittent relief, lots of doctor's visits, physiotherapy, other types of things. So yeah, you're
Mhm.
starting to get a bit hopeless, right? And depressed at this point.
Yeah, I was definitely getting depressed, and one thing I was really grateful for is I have a really strong group of friends, and they were really supportive at that time, just to be with me. It was just hard to leave the house at that time, and so another thing to share about is one of my passions. One of the reasons I come to Mexico City is I take dance lessons, and um, one thing that would take away the symptoms would be dancing. So when I would dance, there would be zero stiffness in my leg. There would be no neuropathy. And so I found that really interesting.
Yeah, and at the
And
time, you probably didn't connect the dots, wondering why that would be, right? Because you're being physical,
yeah,
moving, you're right. It's such a strong clue for neuroplastic symptoms when you can do a lot of physical activity. But
hmm
again, you were what? You were mentally, emotionally satisfied, right? Happy,
hmm
engaged, enjoying yourself.
hmm yeah, yeah. And what was really interesting was I made the connection later on that it's almost like my that part of my brain that needs that high alert. Like we had an agreement that I'd broken, and I was going to be moving into a position where I wouldn't be on high alert all the time anymore. And it's almost like my brain couldn't handle that. It couldn't handle, that type of work, and it just felt like it was shooting out symptoms because of that. And
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. And it's good for the audience to hear this. That sometimes when you are like right switching into something else, that maybe it's less stressful for you. The program's still running, right? The pattern still
mhm.
hasn't abated, so it can actually get act up even more for some people because it wants to stay in that hyper
Yeah,
state.
I think the most important part is it wants a predictable high alert state, and it's very predictable in the position I had. And uh, and now we're moving from predictable high alert to unpredictable high alert, and that's where things became unsettling. And so, anyway, so I was doing all those things, going to all these different doctors, looking at like procedures like spinal taps and other things. Fortunately, surgery was never brought up for me, and so I never had a surgery. But I was really lucky. There was a doctor that I connected with, a pain doctor, and he suggested that I see a pain psychiatrist or psychologist, and that was in November of 2022. So well, that's when I got the appointment. I got it in December 2022. I was pretty lucky. And just within the first couple appointments, I'm like, okay, it's like it was starting to make sense. And I got connected to some of Howard Schubner's stuff and Sarno and different things. And I had a complete relief from symptoms at that point. And again, like many describe, a temporary relief from symptoms for about a month.
Hmm.
And and it really, the whole process of learning about this reminds me of when I was starting to come out of the closet, like where there was really nothing back in the 80s and early 90s available, like positive literature supports, at least where I grew up. And then suddenly you start tapping into different things where, oh, it's okay to be gay. And there's just this like rush of relief. And that's kind of what happened is I had that same type of rush. It made me think of that.
Kind of a relief. Your system just relaxed, right?
Yeah. hmm
Hmm.
Yeah. And, I was thinking, okay, happy ever after done. But no, there was
Yeah, and
still,
that's a good point to make. This pause for a minute. That happens to a good number of people I see, where you call it
hmm
the book cure, or we get
hmm
a respite or a big relief like that. But it's usually not always, sometimes, but not always the end of the story, right? Yeah, it wasn't.
hmm yeah, exactly. I mean, that was actually the beginning of the healing because what I was doing before then, it was, you hear a lot in medicine about controlling the symptoms or managing. And I was on a management plan where making it a little bit less. bad. And I was not on a plan to eradicate symptoms. And so, and the idea of being symptom free was not there, it was not going to happen, you know. But then I had this huge relief. And then, yeah, then began the real work with, with my pain psychologist. And it really was looking back at core beliefs, like what are looking at different characteristics of people with chronic symptoms. And so we started investigating that together, looking at that. And, but the symptoms were still there. And uh, part of it was I was discovering some things that I really had not dealt with, and I was dealing with them at an intellectual level, like, different painful things that had happened to me throughout my life. And like I knew about it, I could talk about it, but if I were to talk to you about it, there would be like an emotional disconnect. Like I wasn't connecting the emotions to it. And I did not want to connect. I did not want to feel those emotions. I did not want to connect with that. And I was not going to connect with that. Like I was like, we'll do everything else. I'll do all the other recovery work. I will do the graded exposure, the listening. I was listening to all your videos, and I was thinking about that. The perfectionistic person in me, I had to start with your very first video, and I was committed to listening to all of them from the beginning to
Yeah.
end.
It's
Like,
just
no jumping around.
a bit about
I
your
had to be.
personality. Yeah. But just to pause on that one with the emotions, I think that's so true for
Mhm,
so many people. I feel like it's sort of the last thing that people will do is really deal
mhm,
with emotions, right? Everybody will work with the other aspects first
mhm,
because it's such a touchy area for us, right? It is an area that
mhm,
it's sometimes difficult to want to go there.
mhm. Yeah, and to me, it makes me think about like I'm, have that experience where I'm feeling cramps in my stomach and I'm laying in bed and I'm like, I do not want to throw up. I do not want to throw up. And I just sit with that feeling. And then when I have that experience of throwing up, it's like, oh, why was I trying to like avoid that this whole time? Because now suddenly I feel better. And so it just, so at first I was focusing a lot on the whole grid exposure, the accepting the symptoms, being with them, just the different. I haven't done it for so long now. I can't remember some of the. There's a book that I read and I can't think of the name of it, but they talked a lot about that.
Was it Alan Gordon's book, The Way Out? Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. And I was noticing like I was just naturally landing different resources at different times when they were really making a difference. And so, of course, the first question I had back in December 2022 was, when will this stop? And of course, there was no answer to that. My pain psychologist did not have an answer, and so that was really hard to let go of. Like, will this stop? When will I feel okay again? You know,
Yeah.
and so yeah,
That's
so I
hard for people. The timeline is, I'll just kind of always ding the bell and pause you when I hear something important. The timeline, right? That we really can't put a timeline on it and we don't want to because that
Mhm,
puts pressure on yourself to
mhm,
heal. And it's impossible really to do that, to put a timeline on it.
mhm. Yeah, because kind of what I noticed as I went through this whole process was uncovering things. And so, like, the first thing, like, I would say my recovery took a different turn in October of 2023. I uh, came across Nicole Sachs' work and the Journal Speak. And that's when I started doing the Journal Speak work. And it was really helpful. I like to write. So it started off with me looking at what are the present stressors that are there, what are the past triggers or stressors that are there, and doing my journaling around that. I was at the time, I don't know if it was good or not, but I would start it off by doing a quick check-in body scan. What are my symptoms? And just to kind of take note of it and let it go, and then move into the emotional stuff. Um, but that was really helpful too, like the journaling component. And so I was doing that, and then I think you and we met initially in December of 2023. I'd come across your channel, and we scheduled something, and I really found like our work together to be really helpful because, you know, I just had the sense that if, you know, you had reco- recovered from some chronic symptoms yourself, and my other pain psychologist had not. And so, like, I would listen to you differently. And because I felt like you were someone who had, you know, worked through it, and I was going to trust whatever you asked me to do. And so then the um, new symptoms started to prop up, and old ones that had been gone became more prominent. Like fatigue became a daily battle. That was a hard
Well,
one.
the back pain at that time was going down. The
Yeah,
fatigue.
it was actually gone. The back pain went
Huh.
away.
Yeah.
The stiff leg went away. All the pain went away. The physical, at some point, the physical pain stopped. And then it became fatigue. And then it was actually backtrack a little bit. It was the summer of 2023. I had my first experience where I developed like a dizziness or a vertigo. And that was scary. And that happened here in Mexico City. And that hung around for about 7 weeks. And I bring that up because I was dealing with the chronic fatigue. In May of 2024, I was diagnosed with having a mild depression. So I was put on an antibiotic. Came back to Mexico City in June 2024. And I remember I was here for a week. And then I was sitting in my chair and I started feeling really nauseous. And then the next day, or I woke up and that dizziness returned. And I was just devastated when that happened because I was here to take some dance lessons. And dance lessons are really unpleasant when you have dizziness, and
Hmm.
everything pretty much is. And
Connected
I,
at the time to emotions or at the beginning stages or not necessarily, or you did already.
that's a really good point because now I was at that point where time to deal with stuff, time to feel the feelings, time to process things. And you and I started meeting more regularly at that point because I'm like, it's time to do this. And I remember our first meeting, like, I just before I was going to meet with you, not our very first meeting, but our first particular meeting after the symptoms kicked in, I became really nauseous to the point where I had a bucket next to me because I was feeling like I was going to throw up. And I think a part of me knew that we're going to start doing some really tough work now. And so and I remember at that point too, I made this connection to fluorescent light. I probably read about it, and then my brain decided that's a trigger. Fluorescent light being a trigger for me, and I remember you sharing kind of a graded exposure, like, you know, let yourself be in that light. And um, so anyway, I uh, at that point I just kind of gave up, which is a good thing. Like I gave up on trying to get better, but by giving up, and it was more of a letting go type of giving up. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to those places I don't want to go. And and we started doing some work with memory reconsolidation. And it's a really powerful tool, which would not have worked before this particular moment. It's almost like I had to get myself to a certain place to be able to do that type of work. And I found that extremely empowering. And I leaned into you, I leaned into some close friends of mine. The symptoms hung around until the end of my trip. And then when it was August 3rd, I flew back to the US. And ever since then, I've been pretty much symptom free. Like I've done the work I needed to.
Maybe share
And
with the audience, which is awesome. We'll get to that. But this is the memory reconsolidation to back up for a bit. Maybe talk a little more
mhm.
about that for people who don't understand what that is or what that was, how you work with that.
Yeah, so it's like going back into a memory where, you know, like that occurred to me as very upsetting or traumatic, and creating a new memory. And it's almost like turning another memory off. And so I'll just create an example right now. I was thinking about, I had a memory that stuck with me. It was during, I was in first grade, I was in an art class, and I was drawing something, and the teacher came over like, no, that's not correct. And she had this thick pencil and drew over my work. And I was going to get up to get a new piece of paper, but she wouldn't, for I don't know why, she wouldn't let me get a new piece of paper. And I was stuck with what to me looked like scribbles on my paper. So I had a certain experience with that. And so, like, a memory reconsolidation would be where I would get up and I would say, I'm sorry, but I'm going to get myself a new piece of paper. And like, I play through the whole, like, possibilities, like what could happen next. Maybe the next thing is, I'm asked to leave the room. And then in my memory that I create, like, okay, I'm not going to go back into the room or be in your class until, I'm treated well. But it's basically taking that adult side of me into that child and empowering myself to practice self-care, set boundaries. And it's quite exhilarating, and sometimes I'll take that memory all the way to the very end. And you can even do things like, even though this happened in 1981, like I can bring like a cell phone in and grab a video of the mistreatment
Right.
and post it online
Exactly.
and,
You can go anywhere with it. That's right.
get me out of this class, and
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. And like we did that route work and you did a lot of that on your own as well. Some of that in
mhm,
session to kind of teach it. I think it's powerful work because you're going back, like you
mhm,
said, people listening to change the memory that
mhm,
exists in your brain. That was the old memory to how the outcome you wanted, right? To be maybe more empowered or to stand up for yourself or get
yeah.
the support you needed.
Yeah, it's really a power. What's powerful about it is I get to go into any memory from my past. It doesn't matter who it's with, what it's about, and I get to honor my feelings. I get to say no. I get to practice self-care, and I get to be strong and powerful. And the way I see it then, like my imagery is once I create like a new memory that really lights me up and that aligns with my who I consider myself to be, like that memory is vivid, it's there. And then that old memory, it's like someone walked into a room and turned off the lights. Like the room is still there, that memory's still there, but now it's like black and white and disconnected.
And you did, just for the audience listening, you would how many repetitions? Sometimes I think we did it in session, but then on your own you might follow up with another one. But I think sometimes it's just one session, right, on some of these memories.
Yeah, it typically it only took one time. And then another powerful thing was, I would talk about it with that core set of friends I have. Like, again, that's something I feel really grateful for, is that having a 3 or 4 people in my life who I can pretty much say anything to and just say it the way it is and talk about like the tough stuff that really, you know, helped with the healing as well.
Yeah,
And
emotional expression. So you're able to follow up with some more expression. People took it in,
mhm,
right? They were supportive of you. Yeah, so
mhm,
great. You did, emotional awareness and expression combined with the shifting the memory through your visualization, right, and imagination.
mhm,
And
mhm,
it's really powerful work, as you could attest to that right now.
mhm. Yeah, and I did that with some of the memories where I was being bullied, and where I could say you need to stop that, or and I tell the teacher you need to stop this, or I'm going to leave the room. And just playing it all the way through, like I get sent to the principal's office, and I tell them nope, like actually I'm not going to come to school tomorrow. I'm not going to come back until it's safe for me, and creating that type of and just keep playing it through, and to the point where I get my way and I come out on top. And
That's the key, is pause there again, ding the bell again. You're becoming empowered. You're coming out in the way you wanted to come out, right? Which is not the victim
mhm,
anymore or being abused or bullied. You're coming
mhm,
out on top, right? And that's and
mhm,
also an expression of your anger in a way, right? Coming out in a powerful,
mhm,
therapeutic sort of way through the changing the
mhm,
memory versus the old way was right. You were the victim, you were taken
mhm,
advantage of. So it is super powerful work. And I'm glad you're highlighting it.
mhm.
Not everybody
Yeah.
talks about it.
Yeah, and I think what made it powerful for me was I noticed by doing that work and creating those new memories, like my whole stance and my whole way of being with people in the present, and my whole way of like being with um, conflict, and noting my boundary. And like that was really hard for me in the past, was to, like, if something didn't sit with me well, like tip almost always I would go into like a threat response of freeze, maybe flight. A lot of times I go into fawn, but sometimes I'd go into a fight, but in a way where it wasn't, you talk about that, how it's about facing things. And when you go into face something, just the whole way a conversation will go, it just change it. It actually creates a result that I'm looking for. And so that was a really powerful tool as well, was just understanding, what do I do when certain types of things happen? Where do I go when someone starts crying? Where do I go when someone starts shouting? Where do I go when someone's angry at me? And another thing that I did a lot of work around was those three really unuseful emotions that you've talked about: shame and anxiety and guilt, like excessive guilt. Um, One thing that's been really helpful for me is when I'm dealing with a situation, to play it out to the very worst possible solution, the worst thing that can happen. And then I got to a point now where I can think of the very worst outcome of a certain situation and know that, oh, I can handle that. And sometimes I don't even know like how I'm going to handle it, but I'm like, you know what? I just know I'm going to handle it and I'll be fine.
Mm.
So yeah. So I've really
Great.
learned, and I think the thing about anxiety to look at is it's the anticipatory anxiety, like the worry, and it's the rumination, which is kind of more the excessive guilt. And so
Right.
I'm just noticing when and now I'm able to just find it, like, because I used to live in that all the time. Now, because I'm learning to live where there's a lot of ease, I when I that feeling comes over me, I can identify it so much more quickly.
Mm.
And
Glad you're highlighting those three because they're ones I would talk about a lot with people, and they're common
mhm,
ones if people have these conditions, right? And they're kind of repetitive emotional states that keep coming up, and so people don't
mhm,
deal with them very well, or they get overwhelmed by them, or they uh,
mhm,
influenced by them. So you're able to kind of step out of it, right? Take it to the end, kind of face it, right, in a way.
mhm,
And say, okay, we'll handle this. And I think that's a
mhm,
nice way to work with it, so it doesn't take over you.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I have a great example of that. I have a friend of a friend is did some work on my car, and something went wrong, and right now the engine's severely damaged, and they have to probably replace the engine. And fortunately, I have a loaner from this person, but I don't. When I go back to the U.S., I have no idea if the car is going to get fixed, if what's my next step. And I was able to think to myself, okay, the very worst thing is I have to buy a new car, and so I find myself things that used to kind of worry me or I kind of obsess about or need to know what's going on, and I'm able to let them go now and just you know enjoy my vacation time like I am right now.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome because, again, pause here again. You can do that, right? You're living proof that you can shift the way
hmm
you handle situations, right? Your mind would go into that worry, and now you're able to legitimately
hmm
let it go and enjoy your
hmm
vacation. Like we can all learn to do this. And so I want people to hear that people say, oh, I'm a worry.
hmm
This is what no, no, you can shift that, right? Through practice
hmm
repetition.
yeah, and as I think about like just stepping back at the whole process, one thing I can definitely say is, even I would say last July, like I think the toughest part and the last step in the recovery for me has been truly believing that I can have a symptom-free life. And I want to be clear about what a symptom-free life looks like. It's not a black and white, zero symptom ever thing. I notice I will get like little moments of symptoms. Since my brain associates Mexico City with dizziness, like a couple weeks ago, I remember I was in the shower and suddenly this dizziness washed over me,
Hmm.
and it hung out for maybe 30 minutes and then it went away.
Hmm.
And I almost think of them as like aftershocks,
Hmm.
where, it's, after I've never been in an earthquake, but I think about something that's temporary. We're all okay. It's unsettling, but it will stop and you'll be just fine. And
Yeah. I mean,
so,
unsettling, the words you use, it sounds like anxiety, right? It was triggered
mhm,
some internal anxiety, and but you're
yeah.
not taken by it anymore, right? You know what it is. You're able
Hmm.
to work with it in a
Hmm.
healthy way. Yeah, I think that's key. We're human, so you can still be triggered. We all can be triggered from stress
Hmm.
or memory or conditioning, like you said,
Hmm.
association.
Yeah, and I think, I want to backtrack a little bit because I talked about I didn't finish this part where I was on lots of different medications, or two of them, I should say, very high dosages. When I started the pain psychologist, I was able to wean myself completely off the medicines. So that was December 2022. That took some trust in myself. And the other thing was really, like, starting last, I would say November 2023, I committed myself like no more chiropractor, no more PT. And if I go to the chiropractor, like literally last year, I went to the chiropractor twice and for an adjustment. And it was so funny. Like I was there in January and then I went back in June and he said, you're in such great shape right now. He's like, this adjustment's going really smoothly. And it's like I almost went back there because I wanted to hear him say that. And it
Yeah,
felt so to be in that space where
right.
I was used to being told how tight things were and wow, you have a lot of tension here. This is out of alignment. And I could even tell as he was adjusting me, like it was so easy for him.
Is that
And
amazing that he's saying that, but at the same time, he has no idea that it was about
mhm,
your emotions and stress coming down, right? Your system
mhm,
settled, and that's why you were less
mhm.
tight. Hence,
Well, he was a great guy, and I talked very freely about why it wasn't tight, so that was nice too. And so, yeah, and so I think that was another thing is letting go of things that I can do it. And it reminds me when I was going through jogging, like maybe 30 minutes a day. And I noticed I was symptom free whenever I would be jogging or walking, but I would have tons of symptoms when I was standing to the point where I had to buckle my knees at
mm,
intersections. Standing and sitting, symptoms. Jogging, walking, no symptoms. Dancing, of course, not many symptoms once I decided that I can spin and things and not, have symptoms. But yeah, so that was.
it's amazing. Yeah. So as we kind of finish up, you got over many different symptoms, right? The
Mhm.
fatigue, back pain, the dizziness, all these things that kind of saddled you for a long time. You said in the fall, right? You went back to school, and a lot of the stuff's kind of been gone since then, right? More or less.
Yeah, and it's not has nothing to do with stress-free living. I had some big stressors hit, like I had a huge tree branch fall on my house, caused several $1,000s worth of damage. Um, Different, like a thing with my car now. And I'm sure if I were to think carefully, there's other things that came up that create stress. And so, you know, I was able to deal with them, and fortunately, the symptoms didn't kick in. And I think as I think about it, I think being open to doing the work that I need to do and giving myself space to just listen and trust my gut and allow, because everyone's recovery is so different, just being open and allowing whatever the next step is to come up.
Mhm.
And now that I feel pretty much on the other side of things, like I am so grateful I've had chronic symptoms because the person who I am right now is so different than who I was even before these symptoms became a huge problem.
Mm.
I feel I carry a lot more wisdom. Um, I, um, yeah, I just feel like I realize I just turned 50 and my body and my emotions, everything, it's never felt this good.
That's
So,
amazing. It's such so well said and just amazing what we can learn
mhm,
out of this, right? You're thankful. People say that people aren't thankful
mhm,
when you're going through, but you can be grateful on the back end just because of all
mhm,
the learning, right? You're a different person. And
mhm,
yeah, truly, truly
mhm.
amazing. Well, it's just an incredible story as they all are in your recovery. Do you want to share anything else you think is important for people listening that are still in the thick of it?
Yeah, I mean, if you feel like you're never going to get out of it, it's never going to get better. I spent years in that place, even after starting the recovery, and it's um, it just means that there's more work to do. There's more to uncover. I think just staying open to what pops up, being willing to do the work. I heard this in for recovery in 12-step programs. They talk about the how, being honest, open, and willing. I think that can go a long way. That just came to my mind right now. And oh, uh, believe that everyone can recover, and we just have
Yeah.
to. Yeah, just have to be. I think sometimes it takes patience, and it really is hard to even, as we deal with these symptoms or miserable, to just let go. Like that's the hardest time to let go. But you know, everyone's brain is different, and by the point will come where you can come over to the other end, and it feels
Yeah.
great on this end of things.
Yeah. And it just to
So,
highlight too, because I know working with you for a while, that you really did the work. I know you put a lot of work and time in, right? We did our sessions, but you did on your own, working with stuff, being willing, like you said, to go and look at things, look at memories, wanting to feel the emotions now. So you kind of really move towards those emotions, right, in a different way and
mhm,
working with them and processing them. And I think that made the biggest difference because now, like you said, stuff doesn't really affect your system as much as it did before. And that's a testament to all the work you've done.
mhm. Yeah, like things that used to really set me over the edge, they really don't anymore. And that's the beauty is as you do the work, as you get to the root of the chronic symptoms, um, it impacts your entire life, and it has a positive impact on your entire life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Very well said. We'll leave it at that. That's amazing, Brad. I'm just so happy you came on. We wanted to share your story. It's a powerful one, many different symptoms, but here you are today. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story.
yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.